Even after 30 years in the courtroom, she didn't see this one coming. It was after 10 p.m. in Baton Rouge, the kind of southern night that hums with quiet suspicion. Regina Cole, smart seasoned calm under pressure, was heading home from dinner, with colleagues not speeding, not swerving, not violating a single law. Yet the flashing red lights pulled her to the curb like they owned her. She knew the look in the officer's eyes the moment they stepped out. Not protect and serve, assume and control. 2 white officers, no questions, no explanations, just orders and arms. Step out of the vehicle. For what? Disturbing the peace. It didn't matter that she was a federal prosecutor. It didn't matter that she had spent nearly 3 decades upholding the very laws they claimed to enforce. In that moment, all they saw was a black woman on a dark road, and all she saw was a system eating itself. She didn't resist, not yet. She knew better. Because Regina Cole wasn't just another black defendant. She was the storm they didn't expect. Regina Cole had spent her entire adult life inside the walls of justice. 30 years, 3 decades in federal courtrooms behind closed chambers and across negotiation tables where truth and power danced a crooked waltz. She wasn't just a federal prosecutor, she was the name people in the Southern District of Louisiana mentioned when things got serious, methodical, unshakable, always 2 steps ahead. And never, not once, did she wear it like a crown. Born in Shreveport, raised in the shadows of the civil rights marches her uncles had walked in, Regina had been bred not for rebellion but for rigor. Her mother was a public school teacher with a voice like thunder when she read Baldwin aloud in the kitchen. Her father a union welder who kept his politics quiet but never missed a vote. She went to Xavier University in New Orleans, top of her class, then Tulane for law school, where she was one of only 5 black women in a room full of legacy names and silver cufflinks. She didn't try to impress them. She let her motions do the talking. Over the years, she earned her reputation the hard way by making cases stick that others fumbled by refusing to cut corners, by mentoring younger black attorneys who didn't have a father, who knew a judge or an uncle in the district clerk's office. She rarely raised her voice, but when she stood, people sat up straight. She wasn't flashy. No Instagram, no sound bites, just work. So that night, a Thursday in mid-April, when she walked out of a steakhouse near downtown Baton Rouge after dinner with a few U.S. Marshals and an assistant district attorney from Atlanta, she wasn't thinking about power. She was thinking about how good the bread pudding had been, about getting home to her cat Marlo, about calling her cousin in Dallas whose boy just got into Morehouse. Her car, a black 2012 Lexus GS, was nothing fancy. Not new, not loud, just reliable. The lights hit her just as she crossed over Government Street about 10 blocks from home. She checked her mirrors. No speeding, no weaving, nothing. She signaled, pulled to the side, turned down her jazz station. She didn't panic. She knew the playbook. She rolled down her window, turned on the dome light, placed both hands on the wheel, just like every black parent in America teaches their child to do. The 2 officers approached slowly, flashlights already up. One tapped the window. "Evening," she said, calm as a still lake. "Is there a problem, officers?" "License and registration." She handed it over. Officer Kyle Driscoll, white crew, cut mid-30s, looked her over like a grocery list. "Do you know why we pulled you over?" "No, sir. We clocked you with a busted taillight." She knew better. She had checked her lights just last week. She knew the signs of a bad stop. "I don't believe that's accurate," she replied. "Step out of the vehicle." She blinked. "I'd prefer not to, until I know the reason." That's when Officer Brent Kessler, tall or younger, moved to the passenger side and opened the door. "Ma'am, we're not asking again." Her hand went to her pocket, not to resist, but to reach for her phone. Before she could unlock it, Driscoll reached in and unbuckled her seatbelt. They pulled her from the car. Not violently, not with punches, but with force, fast, controlled, as if the uniform gave them permission to escalate without cause. She didn't scream, didn't curse, just repeated, "I am a federal prosecutor. You are making a mistake." But they didn't hear her. They cuffed her on the sidewalk, told her she was being charged with resisting an officer and disturbing the peace. No Miranda, no explanation, just paperwork and a patrol car with broken air conditioning. At the station, they held her for 4 hours. She asked for her phone. Denied. Asked to call an attorney. Denied. No fingerprints taken, just questions. Repetitive. Empty. Who were you with? Where were you going? What were you doing in this neighborhood? She answered calmly, patiently, not because she was scared, but because she was documenting. Every word, every pause, every delay. Finally, just after 3:00 a.m., they let her go on her own recognizance. Court date set, a citation, Misdemeanor charges, the kind of thing that gets buried if you don't fight back. She drove home in silence. The next morning she went to work. No drama, no announcement. She briefed a case involving Medicare fraud, then returned to her desk where her staff had no idea what had happened. She didn't want sympathy. She wanted clarity. That night she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and asked herself a question she hadn't had to ask in decades. What if I hadn't had the badge? What if she had raised her voice? What if she had resisted harder? What if there had been no dinner companions to confirm her timeline? No spotless record, no leverage. Would she have disappeared into the court system she once mastered? Would she have become another Sandra Bland? And then something in her shifted. She decided she wasn't going to fight this like a lawyer. She was going to fight it like a black woman with a memory. She called her own attorney the next day. One of the best civil rights lawyers in the region. Quiet, sharp, not afraid of headlines. She didn't ask to suppress evidence. She asked to subpoena it. Courtroom 4B of the East Baton Rouge Parish Courthouse was not unfamiliar to Regina Cole. She'd stood there many times at the podium with a case folder in one hand and justice in the other. But on that warm Tuesday morning in late April, she entered not through the side reserved for prosecutors, but through the main door like any other defendant. There was no nameplate in front of her, no protection, just her a chair, a plastic pitcher of lukewarm water, and a small placard that said, "Defendant." She sat down quietly. People in the courtroom barely looked up. It was a misdemeanor case, a minor hearing, the sort of matter that usually slipped under the radar, settled with a plea or a fine brushed away like dust, in a system that moved fast and thought slowly. But this one had a pulse under it. Behind the bench sat Judge Ellis Holloway, a man known for his conservative streak and measured disdain for what he often called social distractions. Appointed nearly 20 years earlier, Holloway had built his bench reputation on no-nonsense rulings and deference to law enforcement testimony. He was the kind of judge who rarely questioned an officer's word. In the gallery sat a mix of regulars interns from LSU law, a few bailiffs trading jokes, and two men in uniform. Officers Kyle Driscoll and Brent Kessler sitting like smug statues on the prosecution's side. Regina didn't look at them. She didn't need to. She knew who they were. What struck her most was the absence of anyone from her own world. No federal clerks, no U.S. Marshals, no colleagues. She had kept her arrest quiet. Not out of shame, but out of strategy. Let them underestimate her. The prosecutor assigned to the case, an overeager assistant district attorney named Colin DeWitt, stood up to present the charges. Tall, blonde, fresh out of law school with ambition leaking out of his pores, he cleared his throat like he was about to win a debate trophy. "Your Honor," he began, "this is a straightforward matter. The defendant was pulled over for a traffic violation, failed to comply with officers' commands, and created a disturbance at the scene." Regina blinked slowly. Not even a full sentence in, and the first lie had already floated up. She was uncooperative. DeWitt continued. She refused lawful instructions and had to be removed from her vehicle. Judge Holloway nodded along, uninterested. Then DeWitt added almost casually, "The state is offering a plea deal, a $300 fine, and a deferred judgment. The charges would be dismissed upon completion of a short conflict resolution course." He turned to Regina, all performative generosity. "We think this is a fair resolution, Ms. Cole." Regina stood. Her voice was smooth measured. "I decline the offer, Your Honor." Holloway raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that? These are minor charges. You'll be done with it in a day." "With all due respect," Judge Regina replied, "I'm not here to make this easy." The courtroom went still. Judge Holloway looked her over again, this time with a little more attention. "You have the right to counsel. Will someone be representing you today?" "I'll be representing myself." The judge leaned back, now fully alert. "Well, all right then." And just like that, it was on. The officers were called to testify. Officer Driscoll, the more senior of the two, took the stand first. He swore in with a smirk, adjusted his collar, and sat like a man who had told the same story many times before. "Tell us what happened," DeWitt prompted. Driscoll launched into his tale, the routine stop, the suspicious attitude, the refusal to exit the vehicle, the raised voice, the erratic behavior. "She was belligerent," he said, nodding. "Didn't say who she was, seemed agitated. I feared for my safety." "Did she ever identify herself?" "No, sir. Not until we were back at the station." Regina stood. "Officer Driscoll," she said, "did you run my license when you first pulled me over?" "Standard procedure," he said. "Of course." "And what did it say?" He shifted in his seat. "Your name, address, basic info." "Did it include my occupation?" "Probably. I don't recall." She paced once slowly. "Are you trained to note the professions of individuals you detain?" He hesitated. "It's not relevant to field operations." "Let me rephrase. If you had noticed my profession listed as Assistant U.S. Attorney, would you have handled the stop differently? DeWitt stood, objection irrelevant. Judge Holloway was about to sustain, but Regina cut in. Goes to credibility, Your Honor. The judge nodded reluctantly. I'll allow it. Driscoll stammered. I can't say. Regina nodded. Right, you can't say. She moved toward the evidence table and lifted a folder. I'd like to enter into evidence a request for the Baton Rouge Police Department's call logs from the night of April 14th, specifically all communications from Officers Driscoll and Kessler. The courtroom murmured. DeWitt's brow furrowed. Judge Holloway blinked. On what grounds? To verify whether a taillight violation was reported as probable cause, Regina replied. I've already subpoenaed the vehicle inspection data from the state's Department of Public Safety. My car passed inspection the week prior. No taillight issues recorded. Driscoll sat frozen. Regina turned slowly to the judge. The defense contends that the stop was pretextual, that the officers falsified their cause for engagement, and that the defendant myself was targeted based on race and perceived vulnerability. That did it. The gallery stirred. Even Judge Holloway leaned forward now, the weight of his own name suddenly sitting heavier on his shoulders. DeWitt rushed to object, but Regina was ready. I will testify under oath, she said calmly. I will answer any questions the court has, and when I do, I will show you my badge. She reached into her briefcase and laid the polished metal square on the table in front of her. United States Department of Justice Assistant U.S. Attorney. The courtroom fell silent. Even Holloway couldn't mask his reaction. He took his glasses off and rubbed his eyes. And Officers Driscoll and Kessler. Their faces drained of all color, because in that moment the courtroom shifted. No longer was it Regina on trial. Now it was the system. Regina Cole didn't like drama. She didn't do grandstanding. She wasn't there to throw punches or make headlines. But as she stepped up to the witness stand and placed her hand on the Bible, she understood the weight of what was about to happen. She wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for every black woman who'd been pulled over, humiliated, ignored, or bruised, and then told to just let it go. The bailiff swore her in. She didn't look at the judge. She didn't look at the prosecutor. She looked at the jury. Mostly white, mostly middle-aged, a few shifting in their seats, others still trying to catch up to the reality unfolding in front of them. She sat straight. Her voice never rose above conversational tone, but every word landed like steel on glass. My name is Regina Cole. I am an assistant U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Louisiana. I have served in that capacity for nearly 30 years. A pause. She could hear pens scribbling, breath-catching. On the evening of April 14th, I was pulled over by Officers Driscoll and Kessler. I was not speeding. I had no broken lights. I was not swerving. I was not playing music. I had done absolutely nothing to warrant a traffic stop. The courtroom was quiet, not tense, stunned. They said I had a broken taillight. I knew that was a lie, but I didn't argue. I followed instructions. I asked for clarification. When I reached for my phone, they pulled me from my vehicle and placed me under arrest. I identified myself as a federal prosecutor. They ignored me. She turned toward Judge Holloway. He looked away. At no point did I resist. I was not violent. I did not shout, but I was charged with resisting an officer and disturbing the peace. She paused again and looked at DeWitt, the young prosecutor. His face had lost its earlier confidence. He now looked like a man realizing he was sitting on a live wire. I didn't come here to ask for special treatment, she continued. I came here because I wanted the truth to be heard in the very room where truth so often gets buried. She reached for a document in her file, the subpoenaed call logs from Baton Rouge PD. These are the call records from the night in question. Nowhere in these logs is there any record of a traffic stop for a broken taillight in my vicinity. The reason for the stop did not exist. She handed the document to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. Holloway glanced at it and stiffened. I also have a copy of my vehicle's inspection certificate. No electrical faults, no warnings. Car passed inspection 6 days before the incident. My taillights were in perfect condition. She held up the certificate, then lowered it slowly. You see, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this was never about a traffic stop. It was about assumption, about presumption. 2 white officers saw a black woman driving at night and they decided I didn't belong where I was. And then she leaned in just a little. And the only reason we're here today is because I had the tools to fight back. Because I had a badge. The room shifted. Everyone in it, from the reporter scribbling furiously to the young bailiff by the door, now sat differently, straighter, stiffer. Because they weren't watching a defense anymore. They were watching a reckoning. She turned once more to the judge. "Your Honor, I'm submitting a motion to dismiss based on fabrication of probable cause and unlawful arrest. I am also requesting the court preserve this record for formal review by the Department of Justice." Judge Holloway opened his mouth, then closed it. DeWitt, standing now, looked to his own file as if some missing detail might save him. Then he sat down silent. "I rest my case," Regina said, then calmly stepped down. Back at her table, she sat with quiet dignity. No smile, no sigh of relief, just calm. Like a stone in a river refusing to move. Judge Holloway cleared his throat. "Court will recess for 15 minutes before ruling on the defense's motion." The gavel fell, but no one moved. For several seconds, it felt like time had paused, as if the walls themselves needed to take in what had just happened. Out in the hallway, whispers erupted. The young reporter from a small Baton Rouge blog who'd been covering routine court cases for scraps of stories he had caught the moment on his phone. Regina pulling out her federal badge, her voice slicing through the courtroom like a scalpel. The video uploaded within minutes. Within the hour, it hit Twitter. By nightfall, it had crossed 1 million views. Inside the judge's chambers, Holloway sat behind his desk, stone-faced. His clerk stood at the side, pale. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "What I have to," he replied grimly. 15 minutes later, back in courtroom 4B, Judge Holloway returned. He didn't look at Regina, but he did speak clearly. After review of the call logs, vehicle inspection documents, and the totality of the testimony, the court finds that the charges brought against Ms. Cole were not only unfounded, but appear to be based on fabricated claims by the arresting officers. He looked at Officers Driscoll and Kessler. "The motion to dismiss is granted. All charges are dropped. This case is dismissed with prejudice." The gavel fell again, final. In the gallery, no one applauded. They didn't need to. What had just happened didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a warning. Because the system hadn't just arrested a black woman that night. It had arrested itself. The video hit the internet like a lightning bolt through dry brush. It started as a single clip, grainy handheld, posted by local court blogger Miguel Alvarez on his Twitter page. Just over a minute long, it showed Regina Cole calm as steel, pulling out her badge in open court, exposing a lie beneath a uniform. No music, no edits, just truth raw and powerful. By the end of the day, it had been reposted by Sean King, Angela Rye, and Roland Marty. By the next morning, it was trending on TikTok, dissected on YouTube, and analyzed on MSNBC under the headline, "Prosecutor becomes the prosecuted and exposes a broken system." It wasn't just the badge that stunned people, it was how she wielded it. Quiet, focused, like it was never meant to be flashy, but always meant to be final. For the city of Baton Rouge, the fallout was swift. Protests began by Thursday, peaceful but undeniable. Outside the courthouse, signs read, "If Regina had no badge, would we know her name? Justice shouldn't come with a title. We believe black women even without the credentials." The first night brought 300 people to the steps. By Saturday, it was nearly 5,000. Students from Southern University and LSU marched side by side. Church choirs sang under street lamps. Local barbers, teachers, store clerks, attorneys, they all showed up. Not for spectacle, but for truth. On Sunday, someone projected the video on the side of a downtown parking garage. It looped over and over, the glow of the screen casting shadows on the building where hundreds watched in silence. But not everyone was quiet. The Baton Rouge Police Department released a cautious statement claiming a misunderstanding and promising an internal review. But no apology. No accountability. Officers Driscoll and Kessler were temporarily reassigned. By Monday morning, they were placed on administrative leave with pay. But Baton Rouge wasn't having it. Regina herself stayed mostly out of sight. She didn't give press conferences. She didn't speak at rallies. She wasn't interested in becoming a symbol. She still showed up for work every day. Entered through the staff entrance. Headed to her third-floor office like always. But something had changed. Even colleagues who once carried quiet doubts about her calm style now stood up when she entered the room. The white male prosecutors who used to interrupt her in meetings. They waited their turn now. The U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District, a man Regina had known for years, requested a private meeting. "You've opened something we can't put back in the box," he said. Regina nodded. That box was never supposed to exist. By midweek, 3 civil rights organizations had filed joint requests for federal review of not just the officers involved, but the arrest records of their entire precinct over the past 5 years. Patterns were emerging. Black drivers pulled over 4 times more often, arrests without formal charges, resisting arrest citations with no underlying crime. Then the floodgates opened. A retired black schoolteacher named Martha Glenn came forward. She had been arrested in 2019 outside a Walmart for obstructing an investigation after asking an officer why he was searching her grandson. Her case was dismissed, but her grandson was never the same. A teenage boy named Caleb Williams revealed he'd been charged with resisting arrest after trying to record an officer questioning his cousin. He was 17. The charge was still on his record. One by one, the stories came out, and Regina read everyone. She kept them in a folder she labeled unfinished work. On Thursday, at a town hall forum hosted by the local NOAACP, the mic was offered to her. She stood only when asked directly. The room was quiet when she approached the podium. Cell phones were raised, every eye locked in. She didn't speak like someone giving a speech. She spoke like someone telling the truth to people who already knew it. I had a badge, she said. I had a title. I had years of experience behind me, and I still ended up on the curb in handcuffs being lied about by men who wore the same uniform I once trusted. She let it sit. What happened to me is not rare. It is just rarely seen. It is only surprising because the person it happened to didn't match the story they're used to. A woman in the back shouted, "Say that again." Regina's voice stayed steady. You can call this a moment, a mistake, a misunderstanding, but it's not. It's a mirror. A mirror we've been told to turn away from. And I'm here to say no more. Cheers, applause. But Regina didn't smile. Her eyes carried fire and sorrow in equal measure. This system doesn't need reform. It needs reintroduction to the truth. Because somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing people. We started seeing profiles. She stepped back and walked out. No interviews, no headlines the next day with her face splashed across the screen. But the message was already moving. Judge Holloway came under scrutiny for past rulings involving uncorroborated officer testimony. Legal scholars began examining his bias in academic articles. The Baton Rouge DA's office was flooded with formal complaints and requests to reopen closed misdemeanor cases tied to Driscoll and Kessler's arrests. And then a class action lawsuit was filed, led by Regina herself. Not for fame, not for money, but for record correction, for restitution, for truth. It was the first time in Baton Rouge history that a sitting federal prosecutor had filed suit against the local police department while still in office. The headline in the Advocate newspaper read, "The badge didn't save her, but it woke the city." 6 weeks after the dismissal of her case, Regina Cole walked through the security checkpoint of the federal courthouse in downtown Baton Rouge the same way she had for nearly 3 decades. Same shoes, same suit, same no-nonsense leather briefcase. To the untrained eye, it looked like nothing had changed. But everything had. When she passed through the scanner, the younger black guard, Marcus, who'd worked there maybe 2 years, straightened up and nodded with something between respect and reverence. He didn't say hello. He said thank you. Regina offered a short nod. She didn't need praise. She needed the system to start doing what it said it was built to do. That morning, she wasn't there to prosecute. She was meeting with a federal investigator from the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. The call had come in 2 weeks earlier after her lawsuit had started gathering momentum. The DOJ wanted to talk, not just about her case, but about the broader implications. The investigator, a sharp woman named Valerie Diaz, didn't waste time on small talk. "You understand the impact you've had, right?" she asked, flipping through her files. "I understand that people are paying attention for now," Regina answered, her tone even. "You opened something," Valerie said. "Not just in Baton Rouge. All over the country. We've gotten calls from federal defenders in Chicago, judges in Atlanta, law students in Boston who watched that video of you with the badge. They said it changed how they look at courtroom power." Regina paused, thoughtful. "I didn't show them the badge to make a scene. I showed it to remind them they missed what was right in front of them." Valerie leaned forward. "And what do you want next?" Regina didn't answer immediately, because the truth was, she hadn't yet decided if this was the next chapter of her legal career or the last one. She wasn't tired, but she was clear-eyed. She had spent most of her life believing in systems, in rules, in procedure, not because she was naive, but because she believed those tools could be wielded in the right hands. But now she saw the tools weren't broken, the hands were. And so she answered simply, "I want the door to stay open, not just for me, but for the people who walk in without a badge." That weekend, the community center on Plank Road held a roundtable for young people interested in criminal law. What had started as a small legal literacy workshop with 5 teenagers had grown into a recurring gathering of over 60 participants. High schoolers, community college students, people who'd been locked up and were trying to figure out how to get their records expunged. They called the forum the Cole Sessions. Regina didn't name it. In fact, she hadn't planned to attend that day. But Clarice, her friend of 20 years and a school counselor, had called her that morning. "You owe it to them," she said. "They don't want a star. They want an answer." Regina showed up 30 minutes late dressed in jeans and a blouse. When she walked in, the room went quiet. Then came the applause. She shook her head softly, hands raised. "Let's not make me the story." An older man in the corner replied, "You already are." One of the students, a girl no older than 17 with cornrows and oversized glasses, raised her hand. "What made you keep going?" she asked. "When they arrested you, when the court didn't care? Why didn't you just leave it alone?" Regina didn't blink. "Because I couldn't afford to believe that silence was safer." Another student asked, "Do you think it would have been different if you didn't have your badge?" Regina looked him dead in the eye. "It would have been over." And just like that, the room understood. This wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't a story of redemption. It was a story about leverage, about how close we all are to being forgotten until we have the means to be remembered. Later that night, Regina sat on her back porch, a cup of mint tea in one hand, her cat curled beneath the chair. The sun had dipped, but the heat still lingered in the air. She thought about retiring, about finally writing that book her niece kept nagging her about. But then she opened her laptop and saw the headline: Louisiana judge resigns amid racial bias allegations tied to Cole case fallout. Judge Holloway. He hadn't said a word publicly, but the pressure had been mounting. The cases were being re-reviewed. Patterns were exposed, his rulings now marked, his bench vacated. Regina closed the laptop. She didn't cheer. She didn't sigh. She simply whispered good. Because for her, justice wasn't a moment. It wasn't one ruling, one viral clip, or one bad cop suspended. It was cumulative. It was the quiet shift in a room when someone unexpected tells the truth and nobody dares laugh. It was a system being forced finally to explain itself. Not to her, but to the people it always assumed would never ask. Across the state, a black mother watched the video of Regina's testimony for the 5th time. Her son had been arrested last year for resisting, just like Regina, though he was only 17 and had no badge to flash. She turned to her husband, tears in her eyes, and said, "Maybe now they'll believe us." Not because justice had been done, but because justice had been exposed. 3 months after the dismissal of her case, Regina Cole's name no longer dominated headlines. The protests in Baton Rouge had subsided. Judge Holloway's quiet resignation was replaced with a vague news cycle footnote. Officers Driscoll and Kessler were placed on unpaid leave pending formal inquiry. The city issued a vague press statement about rebuilding community trust. But while the noise faded, the echo had only begun. In legal circles, the Cole incident, as some dubbed it, became a case study in criminal law seminars across the country. At Howard University School of Law, a second-year student named Camille Yates gave a fiery presentation comparing Regina's courtroom stand to Gideon Ver's Wainwright. Except in that case, she said a white man fought for the right to a lawyer. In this one, a black woman was the lawyer and the system still tried to bury her. The room applauded. At Stanford Law, a faculty panel discussed the broader implications of invisible authority, the idea that the power of black professionals, especially women, remains unrecognized until it directly threatens the narrative of white control. A student raised her hand and asked if Regina hadn't spoken. What would have happened? The professor paused. She would have become just another name, maybe not even that. Across public defender offices in Atlanta, Detroit, New Orleans, and St. Louis, internal memos began circulating referencing procedural echoes from the Cole case. Trial prep was reevaluated. Young attorneys were trained to spot and challenge habitual pretextual stops, especially those labeled resisting arrest with no primary charge. Even the Department of Justice issued a bulletin noting that recent internal reviews were inspired in part by the integrity of courtroom testimony given by a federal prosecutor facing wrongful arrest. It was the closest thing to an official acknowledgement Regina ever received, but she didn't care for official statements. She cared about traction, and traction she had. In Baton Rouge, more than traction, momentum. The community group that formed around the protests, now calling themselves the Baton Truth Project, began holding monthly forums. They organized a legal first aid kit, pamphlets, online workshops, and street teams that taught people how to safely record police, how to assert their rights, and how to report abuse without fear. Every toolkit started with the same sentence on the first page: justice should not depend on what's in your wallet or what's on your badge. One of Regina's former interns, a young black attorney named Jalen Ross, opened his own practice near North Acadian Thruway. He made it his mission to take the cases others overlooked. The first thing he hung on his wall was a still photo of Regina at the witness stand holding her badge. He told every client, "This is why I fight. Because even the ones who know the rules get knocked down." But the ripples reached beyond Louisiana. In New York, Congresswoman Ayanna Cartwright introduced the Clear Stop Act, a bill that would require federal and local law enforcement to document with time-stamped data the specific legal justification for every vehicle stop. No more vague, suspicious behavior, no more excuses about taillights without written proof. The bill was debated fiercely with opposition from police unions nationwide. During one tense committee session, Rep. Cartwright invoked Regina's name. She was a federal prosecutor. She upheld the law for 30 years. And the system still tried to erase her. How much worse is it for the people who don't have law degrees, who don't have titles, who don't have anyone watching? The room was silent. The bill passed committee. It wasn't law yet, but it had breath now. Regina had become something she never asked to be a standard, a story told in rooms where stories like hers were once considered outliers. And more importantly, she became a measure of what could no longer be dismissed. Not because she shouted, but because she didn't. Her quiet, unshakable calm, the way she presented evidence, refused shortcuts, and spoke only when it was time, forced a country built on noise to pause and listen. Back in Baton Rouge, local news ran a special series titled The System on Trial, with a 6-part deep dive into police misconduct patterns over the past 15 years. Episode 3, The Badge Moment, focused entirely on Regina's case. In one scene, they interviewed her neighbor, an older woman named Dolores, who said, "I've been watching Regina since she moved in 20 years ago. Never caused a stir, never late to work, never raised her voice. But baby, when it was time, she stood up like God was standing with her." And maybe he was. But Regina didn't need divine permission to do what she did. She needed clarity. The clarity to know that this wasn't about her feelings, it was about the structure that allowed lies to live so easily. She kept her position in the U.S. Attorney's Office. She declined multiple book offers, declined a podcast deal, declined an invitation to join a high-profile law firm in D.C. This was never about leverage, she told a friend over dinner. It was about survival. One day, a young black woman named Latavia came to see her. She was 24, studying for the LSAT, eyes bright with both ambition and caution. She asked, "How do I prepare for rooms that were never meant for me?" Regina looked at her long and slow, then said, "By knowing the rules better than they do. And by remembering that silence can be power, but only if you know when to break it." Latavia wrote that down. Years from now, when people recite the names of women who stood against the machine, Sojourner, Rosa, Fannie Lou, Angela, some will add Regina's name quietly. Some will shout it. But all will remember what she proved. That sometimes the most dangerous thing a black woman can do is know exactly what she's talking about and refuse to sit down. Sometimes it comes in the shape of a woman sitting calmly at a defendant's table, one hand resting on the law, the other on her own restraint. Not begging to be believed, just daring the system to ignore her twice. Regina Cole didn't kick down a door. She didn't flip tables. She didn't scream for justice to hear her. She simply refused to shrink. And in doing so, she did what few people ever get to do. She forced a courtroom to see her before it could erase her. But the deeper truth. What happened to Regina only made headlines because she had a badge, because she knew how to subpoena call logs, how to ask the right questions, how to trap a lie using only the law's own language. Most don't have that luxury. Most get silence, or worse, disbelief. And that's why her story matters. Not because she's rare, but because she's not. She is proof that the system isn't broken. It's operating exactly as designed until someone like her walks in and exposes the blueprint. So here's the call to you right now, wherever you're listening from. If this story made your chest tighten, if you felt anger or pride or sorrow, if you thought of a friend, a daughter, a neighbor, or yourself, then don't just feel it. Act. Support your local court watch groups. Help someone learn their rights. Ask your lawmakers where they stand on police accountability. Teach your kids how to protect their voice before they ever need to raise it. And above all, when you see someone fighting quietly in a world that demands they be loud, stand with them. Because silence isn't the absence of power. It's what power sounds like when it's focused. Regina never asked for this spotlight. She didn't need it. But now that it's shining, let it light the way. If this story reached you, share it. Leave a comment with your thoughts or your own story. Send this to someone who needs to believe their voice matters. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the Black Women channel, where we lift stories that speak for the voiceless and honor those who carry fire and silence. Because history isn't just made in loud moments. It's made when someone like Regina Cole says without raising her voice, "No, not today." And the whole system hears it anyway.